How is it going, Diablo fans? So it's finally Frozen Orb time, so here's my Frozen Orb build guide. And I put a lot of time into this, I really tested everything, and it's a little bit unique since we are heavily relying on crowd control damage. But, first of all, if you want to play this build and you don't have the Fractured Winterglass amulet, it's not gonna work. So you need the amulet first. If you don't know how to get that, you get it from the boss ladder by farming Lord Zur. So you definitely need to get your hands on it before you can play this build. If you have the amulet, this build is very fast in pushing like mid-level pit runs. So if you want to farm tier 61 pit or something like that, which is very good for building up materials to continue your masterworking progress, this is very, very strong. But for pushing very high levels, you will run out of boss damage at a certain point. That being said, I'm not at the max of this build. I am pretty sure I can still like triple my damage with optimizing my gear, doing all the masterworking and everything. But still, boss damage is going to be an issue later on. But to speed farm the mid-tier levels is very, very good. As you can see right now, the footage in the background is basically tier 70s, and I can farm those in like 2 minutes, 30 seconds. And that's a very efficient way of getting your masterworking materials. So I divided this build guide into two sections once again. The one is the a little bit early game focused, but you still need like quite a bit of gear. And the second one is going to be the late game, where we completely transition out of survivability and more transform it into a glass cannon build, which is never going to be hit anyway, which can stagger bosses so fast that you completely can ignore all the boss mechanics and you can completely ignore the shadow clones and everything. And so far I made it to like tier 78s with it, but I haven't really tried hard, and if I would, I could probably get this into like tier 85s at this current state, but I'm still working on masterworking my gear. So currently in my state I'm running at 70% attack speed, so I'm still missing 30% attack speed, I'm still missing major tempers on my weapon, but the build is still working great. So here's just a very, very quick explanation of how this build works. We're using the Fractured Winterglass amulet, and what that's gonna do is whenever you throw a Frozen Orb, it's gonna spawn a conjuration with a certain chance, and the conjurations then abuse your conjuration mastery passive to give you more movement speed, mana regeneration and damage. Furthermore, those conjurations have a lucky hit chance to throw more frozen orbs, but this is not going to trigger an infinite loop or anything like that, right? So only the frozen orbs you throw yourself are going to trigger. Also, Frozen Orb from the Frozen Orb enchantment do not trigger conjurations. Frozen Orb from the casting multiple Frozen Orbs tempering attribute do not trigger additional ones. So it's really just one per cast. So that's pretty much all about it already. We try to abuse a very high attack speed to spawn many conjurations, to buff our stats, and to throw as many Frozen Orbs as possible. And then bosses, we use the tempering attributes, which give us crowd control. So every armor piece you can temper, like chance to immobilize, chance to slow, chance to freeze, stuff like that. And using that in a boss fight with throwing a lot of frozen orbs and also the conjurations attacks and conjurations frozen orb, it will trigger a lot of those lucky hits, which allows us to stagger the bosses very, very fast. And very conveniently, when the boss is staggered, it does not spawn those shadow clones. And then when the boss comes out of stagger, the shadow clone timer basically resets. So it takes like another 5 to 10 seconds until the shadow clone spawns. So if you're fast enough and you're staggering the boss again before he even spawns the shadow clone, you can pretty much completely ignore this whole mechanic. I'm not at that point yet. I still need a little bit more attack speed to get there, but I'm getting there. Anyway, that's it for the short explanation of this guide. You can find the links to all the sections of this guide in the description down below. Also, there's a link to the planner and to my website for all my other build guides. And now, without further ado, let's go into the skill tree for the early version of the build. For the skill tree, we put 2 into Firebolt, since we're using Firebolt enchantment, then 5 into Frozen Orb, into Enhanced Frozen Orb, into Destructive Frozen Orb here. We don't need Greater Frozen Orb. The Lightning Spears are going to take care of the vulnerable for us anyway. So we use Destructive Frozen Orb for the extra mana regeneration. This build is crazy mana hungry, and this helps us especially during the boss fights. And then 1 into Devastation and 3 into Elemental Dominance for the extra core skill damage. And then we want to have +2 or +1 defensive on our chest piece. Or we want to have Shaco or both. So we really don't want to use the skill points for Flame Shield, for Teleport, and for Frost Nova. We need the 3 skill points because this build needs a lot of skill points and we really can't spare them. So Obviously, you can put the 3 points in there if you don't have an item, but it's actually pretty easy to get a chess piece with +1 defensive skills, so I would highly recommend doing so. Then 1 into Elemental Attunement, 3 into Glass Cannon, and 1 into Ice Armor, into Enhanced Ice Armor, into Mystical Ice Armor. This gives us a 15% extra damage against frozen enemies, and this build is 100% focused on damage to any kind of crowd-controlled mobs, even on the boss fights. On the boss fights, our strategy is to stagger the bosses extremely fast and then damage them during the stagger phases. So if we enter a stagger phase for a boss, we hit Ice Armor and we get 15% extra damage right there. And then we put 3 points into Precision Magic. This is obviously a lucky hit based build. 1 into Ice Blades, into Enhanced Ice Blades, into Summoned Ice Blades, and Lightning Spear into Enhanced Lightning Spear, into Invoked Lightning Spear. This is gonna pre-stun everything, so we never have to worry about mobs hitting us at all. Then 3 into Conjuration Mastery. The other 3 are coming from the Fractured Winterglass. And then 1 into Align the Elements, 3 into Mana Shield, 3 into Protection. We at least need a little bit of defenses here. And obviously we need the Barrier for the synergies. And then 1 into Inner Flame, 3 into Devouring Blaze. This is a pretty crit-based build, so we definitely need Devouring Blaze. And then we put all these Frost passives here, damage, damage, more damage, and Mana Regeneration. So we definitely need Frigid Breeze here. Again, this build is very, very mana hungry, so we really cannot sustain without using this. In a later iteration of the game, for example, you can craft Frigid Breeze ranks on your rings, but it's pretty difficult to actually do so. So these 3 skill points is probably something which can be redistributed in a later stage of this build. And then we put 1 into Unstable Currents and 1 into Prime Unstable Currents. We really don't need this extra skill slot, so this is a nice way of giving us a 25% attack speed buff. Especially when we are in stagger phases, when fighting bosses, this really gives us like a little bit of extra peak damage here. And the sad story with the Sorceress and the attack speed right now, Sorceress has no real access to good attack speed. So unless you get crazy good gear where you like have greater FX attack speed on every single piece of gear, I have no other choice to get my attack speed from Ace's Ferocity and Aspect of Ancient Flame at this point. So at a later stage of the game, a later iteration, if you have better gear with greater FX and masterworked attack speed, you can get attack speed from your gear. And then we would remove Ace's Ferocity and switch it to Avalanche, basically, which gives us a nice little damage buff. But for now, we unfortunately still have to run Ace's Ferocity and Ancient Flame. If we don't have to run this anymore, then, you know, we can basically remove a full aspect, get like another damage aspect, and get Avalanche, which basically is going to give us another like 50% damage, which is going to be huge. But it's going to take a while to farm that gear to get to that state. For the skills, Ice Blades is actually one of our most important skills. So right now, I don't have good cooldown reduction. I have a pretty long cooldown on Ice Blades. There's a temper, which is Ice Blades cooldown reduction, which is probably gonna be very impactful for this build. Again, this is something which has to be explored later. For now, I don't have it. It works all right with the 12-second Ice Blades, but there's definitely ways to improve on that. And the Ice Blades are so important because in the boss fights, you gotta stay on top of your conjurations. You gotta keep like 10 to 14 conjurations up, and that's just happening by spamming Ice Blades. So really, you spam Frost Orb and Ice Blades all the time. So if you reduce the cooldown on Ice Blades significantly, you could probably double the amount of Ice Blades, which leads to like 3 or 4 more active conjurations at the time, which might be a huge difference. So definitely take a look at Ice Blades cooldown reduction on rings here. And then we have Teleport for obvious reasons. We have Flame Shield. Flame Shield is extremely important in boss fights because we play a style where we stagger the boss extremely fast, and then once the Shadow Clone, whatever it's called, spawns, we press Flame Shield so we can dodge the attack while keep attacking the boss, and then the boss usually gets staggered before a second one spawns. So you only have to deal with one of the Shadow Clones before getting the next stagger phase, and you have 3 stagger phases which you can easily take down the boss with. So it's a pretty easy phase tank playstyle against bosses here. And then we have unstable currents. This is really just for attack speed. We don't do anything else with it. It's very important for the stagger phases during like boss fights. Frozen Orb, we spam Frozen Orb all the time. So you wanna be spamming Frozen Orb. Even if there's no mobs, spam Frozen Orb on the ground. We have to keep at least 10 conjurations up at a time, unless if we don't, we get out of mana. So this is like a permanent spam skill. So I recommend to put it on a key, like Q, for example, and then during a fight, you basically hold Q and spam W, for example. So Q, you hold it, so the frozen orbs get fired on the boss, and then you press W whenever it comes off cooldown. So you can basically be permanently casting frozen orb and refreshing your ice blades there. And then ice armor here. Again, this gives a 15% damage increase to frozen enemies, so you want to hold on to your ice armor during the boss fights until the boss gets into stagger phase, then hit ice armor, take the extra 15%, and then nuke it down. So for the enchantments, Firebolt enchantment is mandatory. I tried it with Hydra and Burn and everything. I just couldn't get it to work. So for me, I at least need Firebolt enchantment. Otherwise, I'm going to be way too slow during the dungeon phase. During the boss phase, Firebolt enchantment is actually bad, but I mean, I need like 30 seconds more for the dungeon phase, and I need like, 10 seconds less or something like that for the boss phase, at least at the current stage. It might be that later iterations, if we want to break like tier 100s or something like that, that we have to switch to Hydra with burning, so we can exchange this here for Frozen Orb enchantment. And as the second slot, I use Frost Nova enchantment. This slot is kind of open, so you can do 3 different things. First thing you can do is Frost Nova enchantment. This gives you the fastest clear through the dungeon, because most of the time mobs are going to be frozen before the first frozen orb even hits them. And remember, frozen enemies take like 150% extra damage or something. Like, it's crazy. If the mobs are frozen, they take like so much more damage. And what happens is the lightning spears travel off screen, and most of the time, stuff is already going to be frozen when you arrive there, and their mobs die like significantly faster. Also, this gives you the fastest stagger during the boss fights, period. I tried all the other one, Frostbolt enchantment, it's just way, way worse. So this gives you crazy high stagger in the boss fights. Second option you can play is Ice Blades enchantment. So if you struggle, for example, with resource, you can do Ice Blades enchantment, and then you can go button smashing, right? You can smash Ice Blades, teleport, flame shield, ice armor. You can smash it like crazy, and you will have like 3 or 4 more conjurations active at a time, which gives you additional mana regeneration. So it's definitely also an option. You have to try it out what fits you best. And the next one is you can also do Frozen Orb enchantment. Works also just fine, gives you a little bit of extra burst. But the Frozen Orb enchantment cannot spawn conjurations, so it's like significantly weaker than before. But you can also play this, so just try out which one fits you best, actually. You can definitely play either one of these. For the items, it definitely plays best if you have Shaco. So Shaco gives you +4 skills, it gives you damage reduction, and the resource generation is very, very mighty in this build. But it works also fine without Shaco. If you have Shaco, good for you. If you don't have it, it doesn't matter all that much, but it matters, obviously. You can also use a Legacy Shaco if you're playing on Eternal. It works just fine. Nothing really changed with the Shaco at all, so you can save yourself the Masterworking here. And then for a helmet, we want to get a helmet with intelligence, lucky hit chance, cooldown reduction, and we want to temper maximum life and any kind of crowd control on lucky hit. We want to temper all those lucky hit crowd controls because this helps us staggering bosses way faster, and it's really important in this build. And you will see that if you look at the runs later, how fast we can actually stagger those bosses. And then for the aspect, I like playing Undying because I don't want to chuck potions, and it works really good in this build. But you can also play, for example, Exploiters, which gives you a little bit more burst in the dungeon phase. But you can also get a defensive aspect like Everliving, for example. Then for chess piece, you want to get intelligence, mana per second, and defensive skills. If you have Shaco, you technically don't need the defensive skills. You could get maximum life roll on here. And we want to have 1% total armor roll to reach our armor cap of 9.35k or whatever it is. And then, again, lucky hit for any kind of crowd control on this. And we play the aspect of fortune. Since this is a lucky hit build, we really need more lucky hit, right? For our gloves, we want to have intelligence, attack speed, rank to frozen orbs, and the offensive modifier, the best one we can get, is actually damage to frozen enemies, because remember, we just damage bosses during stagger phases, so damage to frozen enemies here is the highest roll. Definitely you can also get cold damage or damage to crowd control, but damage to frozen is the best one here. And again, lucky hit for a crowd control effect here. And then we play the accelerating aspect. This build is crazy attack speed hungry, so we need to get any bit of attack speed we can get here. Then for our pants, we play intelligence, maximum life, 1 armor roll. So again, we want to reach the armor cap. And then we temper again, maximum life. And we again temper like 1 chance to, immobilize or whatever, like 1 crowd control on lucky hit basically. And as for our aspect, we're going to use the concussive strikes one. So this, again, is just for the stagger phases of the bosses. I'm not 100% sure actually if it works, but I think a boss counts as every crowd control condition, so I'm pretty sure dazed is one of them. So what it does, basically, when the boss is staggered, you get 20% extra damage for a defensive aspect, so that's actually pretty nice. Then for boots, best in slot here is definitely Asus boots. Mine are extremely bad, but it's kind of required at this stage of the game. If you don't have Asus boots, do yourself a favor, go to Varshan and just farm them. It's not a big deal. And you really want to try to get a high movement speed roll and high mana cost reduction roll on these here. Then for our weapon, we want to go with a two-handed weapon. I tried it with wand and focus. Yeah, you get a little bit more cooldown reduction, but I couldn't get it to work. And you want to have intelligence, maximum life, and the damage stat. Vulnerable damage, for example, is good. And I have damage to crowd controlled on here. Again, damage to frozen would be much better. And then chance to cast Frozen Orb projectiles twice. And if you're tempering, you actually want to hit the chance to cast Frozen Orb projectiles twice. That's actually going to do a lot, but I don't have the materials to retemper this right now. And then on that, we put the aspect of the Frozen Orbit. So Frozen Orbit usually makes your Frozen Orb explode 2 additional times, but it only deals 60% of the damage. So if we put it on a two-handed weapon, it actually buffs it to 120% of the damage. And this is its own bucket, right? So this is skill damage. So everything gets multiplied with this. So this is a very important aspect on your weapon. It's going to give you so much more damage here. Then for Amulet, we have to use the Fractured Winter Glass here. I haven't masterworked it all the way to the end yet. I am pretty sure you just need to hit Conjuration Mastery once, so you can get a +4 when you fully masterworked it. I'm not entirely sure if you hit it twice, if it will jump to 5. Not so sure, actually. So cooldown reduction and the Conjuration Mastery levels are important here. And I have a good mid-roll here, I guess. 43% for casting a Frozen Orb, I guess is nice. And this, obviously, 50% would be better. So the first stat is very important. The second one, Conjurations casting Frozen Orbs, is not super important. It's not going to happen all that much. It's going to happen, but mainly we focus on the Frozen Orb damage from the Frozen Orbs we cast ourselves, since we simply cannot get like this huge numbers of like 20 to 30 conjurations up, which we could get on the PTR. We really have to settle with like 10 to 15 conjurations, which is the absolute maximum we can get right now. So the lucky hit stat here is not extremely important. Then for our rings, I specifically decide not to use Tal Rasha ring, and I'm pretty sure I'm doing this in all my builds. I cannot find anything good about Tal Rasha ring anymore. I think that item is done. Because here's the attack speed problem. Sorceress has no access to attack speed other than gear and Ancient Flame. So Tal Rasha ring has no attack speed. Tal Rasha ring has no intelligence. So it has really, really bad stats. And also you miss the tempering, the damage temper, the resource cost reduction temper. So you're going to miss out on so much if you're playing Tal Rasha ring. And maybe you're going to get like an extra 10% cooldown reduction and an extra, it's probably not even 10% damage. In this build, you would actually do way less damage with playing the Tal Rasha ring, because you don't have the force stack for Tal Rasha. So you would only have 45%, As you can see, I can get 30% with my aspect. 113 intelligence, that's another 11%. So I'm already at 41%. So I'm pretty much at the same damage levels. If you add the additives, I will be at a way higher damage level than playing Tal Rushering. And remember, the 4 stack we cannot get because we need the double Frozen Orb, so we cannot cast like shadow damage. We cannot temper shadow damage on our weapon. So that's why I'm playing regular rings here. And same with the second ring. Attack speed, critical strike chance, intelligence. This is not the perfect one, but that is what you want to get. And tempering, again, resource cost reduction. And you want to have one roll with cold damage to get your frigid breeze up to 30%. But in general, damage to frozen would be the best stat for this build here. For the Paragon, again, we are like completely focused on damage to crowd control. So this is like probably something you would play completely different because some of these modifiers are a little questionable, but I'm going to explain why I'm doing this. So first of all, I'm going to use Flame Feeder. 10% increased direct damage to burning enemies. It's just for bossing, so this is one of the good multiplayer glyphs we can get here. Then we're moving over to the Enchantment Master board, and we're gonna place Elementalist here for the 15% damage. So this is pretty basic stuff here. Then next board is going to be Burning Instinct. We're gonna grab the bonus damage and damage reduction and the damage reduction here. And we're gonna play Tactician here for increasing those bonuses. Then next board is going to be the Frigid Fate. Frigid Fate node gives us a nice extra 28% damage here. We pick the lucky hit nodes, we pick some vulnerable damage reduction here, and then we put in our exploit glyph again for another 10% multiplicative damage here. Then next board is going to be the Elemental Summoner. And this is the only glyph I really hate to play, but you have to play it. It doesn't work without. So you have to play Conjurer, so your conjurations last longer. It definitely works better with the Conjuration Mastery and the mana regeneration and everything. So I really would like to play another damage glyph, but I really can't. You have to play this glyph. And then next board is going to be Searing Heat. We just picked this for the glyph socket. We picked the control glyph here. So usually control glyph is like kind of an unpopular choice because it doesn't give you boss damage. But since we are staggering bosses in the fastest possible way, we are focusing on this because this gives us a 20% multiplier to bosses, which is huge. And then next spot is going to be the Ceaseless Conduit. Again, just for the glyph socket. We put in our Destruction glyph here for even more multiplicative damage. And then our last board, we picked the Icefall here, which is going to be another 30% damage to frozen enemies. So really, all our damage here is to frozen. Stagger the boss, damage it. That is what it comes down to, because the bosses are the only difficult when playing pits. Everything before the boss is irrelevant, only the boss counts. And since Frost, especially Frozen Orb, there's so much bonus damage to Frozen, we just cannot play it without staggering. So it's not like playing Fireball where you have like the real burst damage here. The damage really only goes to crowd-controlled enemies, to frozen enemies, and for example to dazed enemies from the aspect. And then also we get this chill application. So definitely get these chill application nodes here. They are very important. It gives you faster stagger, basically. All right, for the more advanced skill tree, I'm showing you the skill tree with Shaco on now, so don't wonder why there's like 4 or 5 of all the basic skills. So again, 2 into Firebolt for Firebolt enchantment. Then we max out Frozen Orb into Destructive Frozen Orb, same story like before. Then we do not choose Elemental Dominance right now, and that is because we want to have the fastest possible boss stagger. So right now I'm choosing Snap Freeze and Cold Front, so you could take these 3 points and this one out and go back into Elemental Dominance. But just right now, I don't have the stagger I need. So when I keep upgrading my armor pieces, I will get more and more stagger. But right now, I'm not there yet. And I want to stagger the bosses as fast as possible. So that's why I am not using these 12% damage here right now. And then we don't put any points into our defenses. As said, we have Shaco and we also have defensive skills on our armor pieces. Then 3 into Glass Cannon, 1 into Elemental Attunement, 1 into Ice Armor, Enhanced Ice Armor, and Mystical Ice Armor. Again, Mystical Ice Armor is for the damage buff here. Then 3 into Precision Magic for the lucky hit. Ice Blades into Summoned Ice Blades.
Lightning Spear into Invoke Lightning Spear for the pre-stunning. Then Conjuration Mastery for my main damage multiplication. Then we put 1 into Align the Elements, 3 into Mana Shield, 3 into Protection. We still need some defenses, even though this is the Glass Cannon build of all Glass Cannon builds. 3 into Cold Front and Snap Freeze, so this is solely for like staggering bosses and freezing stuff faster. And then we go 1 into Inland Flames and 3 into Devouring Blaze. And 3 into Permafrost, 3 into Hoarfrost, 3 into Icy Touch. We don't play Frigid Breeze right now. Since we're playing Avalanche right now, it doesn't seem to be a huge mana issue here anymore. For the skills, it's pretty much the same as before. You want to hammer Ice Blades whenever you can do that, because it gives you mana regeneration and extra damage. Teleport, Flame Shield mainly, very important during the boss fights. You want to stand still, press Flame Shield when the Shadow Clones do their attacks, so you can just keep their nuking. Then Unstable Currents, again, mainly for boss fights for extra attack speed. Frozen Orb, don't need to talk about it. Ice Armor is for barrier and 15% extra damage on the boss fights again, so only use it when the bosses are staggered, so you get an extra 15% damage. It also gives 30% mana regeneration, which is nice, but not so important actually. And then Firebolt Enchantment, we still need this. And for enchantment slot, also same as last time, right? I play Frost Nova Enchantment, which gives you the fastest stagger on bosses, and it gives you a great clear speed through the dungeons, because most of the time mobs are going to be pre-frozen always, and Frozen is our strongest damage multiplicator here. You can also play Ice Blades Enchantment, which tends to give you a little bit more conjuration, a little bit more mana regeneration. So if you struggle with mana, definitely go with Ice Blades Enchantment. And you can also go Frozen Orb Enchantment if you want. It gives you like a little bit more burst, but I'd feel like it's pretty weak, since the Frozen Orb Enchantment doesn't spawn extra conjurations from the Conjuration Mastery from the Fractured Winterglass anymore. For the advanced version, I would highly recommend playing Shaco. If you don't have Shaco, I would not play the advanced version, just play the other version. It's going to be much stronger. Shaco is pretty much required for this, since, you know, we are like focusing on solely damage and glass cannon style. So without the Shaco, you're going to lose so much damage. It really doesn't make so much sense. And also the resource generation from the Shaco is pretty important here. In this version, we are playing Topaz. So we are socketing intelligence. We are really playing glass cannon here, right? We don't need the survivability at all. During the dungeon, nothing is going to ever touch us. And the boss fights, we gonna stagger them so fast that it doesn't even matter. So we use intelligence. It is an extra 500 intelligence. So that is actually 50% damage. So don't underestimate it. You don't have to play rubies. I know everybody's telling you always to play rubies. Well, guess what? It's not actually required. So my Shaco has the most terrible masterworking. You ideally want to hit the cooldown reduction or the resource generation here. All stats is pretty much the worst thing you can hit here. Then for chess piece, we play Aspect of Fortune, Intelligence, Mana per second, and Defensive skills. In this build, you have always Shaco, so you can switch one like defensive skills into maximum life if you want, but I do not recommend it. I still like this setup the most, and we want to temper one total armor roll and one random crowd control on lucky hit, and the Aspect of Fortune giving us extra lucky hit. And again, as you can see, Topaz is going to be the way to go here. Then for gloves, you want to have intelligence, attack speed, and frozen orb ranks. Maybe you want to have critical strike chance instead of intelligence. My crit chance is pretty low. You kind of have to balance this out a little bit. For tempering, we want to have damage to frozen enemies. That is the strongest one we can have here. And lucky hit again with a random crowd control effect here. Attack speed, you want to have greater FX. If you can get an attack speed greater FX, basically it's going to be the strongest. To make this build perfect and hit 100% attack speed, you need greater FX attack speed on gloves and both rings. And you're also going to hit greater... I think you gotta hit it twice, at least once. Maybe you gotta even hit it twice with the masterworking twice. So it's really, really very hard to get 100% attack speed in this build. And that's going to be the challenge, like keeping masterworking the items until we really can reach the attack speed. Because right now, with the elixir on, I'm sitting at 71.7%. So I'm still missing 30% attack speed here. So really, greater FX attack speed gear is absolutely the way to go. I know those are hard to find, but you need them to make this build work perfectly. Then for our pants, again, we go for Topaz and we go for Intelligence, Maximum Life, Armor, and Life Temper. And the other temper is the, again, a random crowd control effect for the fastest staggering. And we go for the Concussive Strike aspect here. This gives us another 20% damage versus bosses when they are staggered. Then you want to have Asus boots. Mine are pretty terrible. You want to focus on mana cost reduction and movement speed. I'm gonna get better ones soon. The tempering doesn't really matter so much. The masterworking doesn't really matter so much what you hit. Ideally, I guess the best thing you can hit is movement speed, but also mana cost reduction is going to be good. Then for stuff, we still use the same stuff than before. We use the Frozen Orbit aspect on our stuff to get the maximum damage out of our Frozen Orbs. Remember, this 120% is basically skill damage, so it comes before all multipliers. So that's why the aspect is so strong on a 2 and a weapon, because usually the explosions would do 60% damage of the original Frozen Orb. Now they do 120, and then those 120 get multiplied with everything else. And for the stats, you want to have Intelligence, Maximum Life, a damage stat like vulnerable damage is good, and you want to temper, again, damage to Frozen is the best temper, damage to crowd control is alright, and you want to temper the Frozen Orb to cast twice, and I have to remaster work this because you want to hit the Frozen Orb to cast twice, at least once, better even if you can hit it twice, so it's gonna make your build so much more stronger. As you can see, there's like so much stuff I can still optimize on this build, but it's really hard. Like, it takes a long time to farm the materials and keep resetting, keep retempering, so that's really gonna take a long time until you have these items. But just imagine this stuff, Masterwork to 12 of 12, with 2 masterworking hits on the Frozen Orb, so it's probably going to sit around like 70% or something like that. So basically, we're just almost casting 2 Frozen Orbs every single hit. So that's going to be just plain amazing there. Then for Amulet, Fractured Winterglass, I don't know yet if the Conjuration Mastery is going to jump to 4 when I reach 12 out of 12. I really hope it will. If it doesn't, then the plus... the tempering, the masterworking hit on Conjuration Mastery is actually wasted. So best thing, obviously, you can hit here then is cooldown reduction. But I think it's gonna jump to 4 anyway. So not sure how it comes down to. I guess in a dream, you could hit Conjuration Mastery twice, and then you would get even +5. But I don't think it's gonna be that strong. It depends on the rounding, because there's definitely rounding in place. So if you end up at 2.8, for example, you're still going to be at 2. So 2.8, it's not going to equal 3. So if in the end, for example, you would end up at 3.9, you wouldn't get the +4. You would stay at the +3. So that's very depressing, but, you know, that is just like it is. And then for our rings, ideally you want to have Intelligence, Attack Speed, Critical Strike Chance, and your Temper. Best, again, damage to Frozen. And I have resource cost reduction. I think the best temper here is going to be Ice Blade's cooldown reduction. I don't have it yet. I don't have new rings to retemper to test this, but Ice Blade's cooldown reduction is going to help you a lot, especially during boss fights. You're going to get way more Ice Blades up. It gives you additional damage, additional mana regeneration, additional movement speed. So the Ice Blades really do so much for you. So I really think Ice Blade's cooldown reduction will be the way to go here. And for a second ring, same story. You want to have Intelligence, Critical Strike Chance, Attack Speed. I have a wasted 33.8% damage on here, unfortunately. But, you know, I just can't give this ring with 21% attack speed away. It's just too strong. And you want to have 1 temper with cold damage, so your Frigid Breeze is going to max out. And again, I have resource generation here, so I think, again, Ice Blade's cooldown reduction will be the way to go. And I totally forgot the aspect, so we have Storm Swell and Shredding Blades. Those are the strongest aspects. You could play Control, but it's also a 30%, so I like these most because they have the best conditions, basically, and they both give 30%. So the Paragon board, we reworked and made it even more glass cannon. So we basically took out all the resistance nodes to tweak out a little bit more damage here. So we really just go for the non-fizz, and then we put the flame feeder here for 10% increased damage to burning enemies. And we go over to the next board. It's going to be the Enchantment Master. We really just pick this one node with the life here, and then we go through our Elementalist for 15% extra damage here. And moving over, this is going to be Burning Instinct. We pick the damage reduction and the damage to burning, and we pick these damage reduction nodes here, and we put in Tactician here to boost those even further. Then we go into the next board. That's going to be the Elemental Summoner. This is the board, like from there, this point on, there's changes. So we just put in our Conjurer glyph here. I'm very disappointed, but we have to use Conjurer. We cannot really work without it. We need the extra conjuration duration. It just doesn't work without it. And then we pick the attack speed nodes here. So this is basically what it is, 9.9% attack speed. No, 8.9% attack speed actually. And since attack speed is really so hard to get now, I don't really see another way fixing our attack speed than getting these nodes here. It doesn't cost so many extra points to choose this board, like 4 or 5 extra nodes to actually do this little bit longer way through here, right? And then we move to the next board. That is going to be the Frigid Fate. We pick the Frigid Fate, we pick the Lucky Hit, and then we don't pick these nodes even anymore because we don't have the extra 3 points to spare. So screw this, poor 10% damage reduction from Vulnerable. And we put in our Exploit glyph here for more multiplicative damage once again. Then move over to the Searing Heat. We just picked this for the glyph socket. We just go for the control. We just want the 20% increased damage. We don't care so much about the additive part. So we're really just going through this board just for the glyph socket. And next board is going to be Ceaseless Conduit. Same story. We just go here through the glyph socket. We do Destruction with 39. This is potentially 4 points, which can also be removed and redistributed. We're only gonna lose like 40% additive damage. Well, actually, it's like 60% additive damage. So I would keep these for now. And last board then is going to be the Icefall. This is another 30% damage to frozen enemies, which is very important. And these chill application nodes also help very much with staggering the bosses. So as you can see, we stripped out all the Ores nodes here because we have 2.4k intelligence, which is basically fixing our Ores together with 1 diamond in our jewelry. And again, this is Glass Cannon, right? So I'm not even talking about if we could get more hit points out of this Paragon board. I feel like the current meta for Sorc will be still like as Glass Cannon as you can be, and that is going to be it.